So collectively, our first two guests, and this is a long list. I need to make sure I don't forget anything. Collectively, our first two guests have produced credits, writing for children's animation, primetime network sitcom, hour-long television, reality TV, game shows, and theatrical motion pictures. They are producers for both television and the movies. Individually, Peter has created and sold numerous television pilots to the networks and studios, including Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and CBS. And to date, Josh has directed 5 feature-length motion pictures. The last of which I think is coming out on DVD this week, right, Josh?
Yeah, it starts showing on Showtime this week.
Premiering on Showtime this week. Please welcome Peter Goldfinger and Josh Stolberg.
Hey. How are you, Chris?
Hi.
God, after Kristen's introduction of you, I don't know why we're not interviewing you, to tell you the truth. Anyway.
So, let's start from the very, very beginning. Pete, you grew up outside of Boston.
I did.
Josh, you grew up outside of Tampa.
Everybody thinks I'm smarter than him right now.
Why, is it the jacket?
No, it's just Boston, Florida. No offense.
So, was making movies and creating television something that you guys always knew you wanted to do, like from, toddlerhood, or how did it go about?
I was a theater geek growing up, so I did a lot of school plays, and that's how I found performance and fell in love with movies. So that when I went to college, I went to college for theater, so I just kind of transitioned that way.
He went to college to direct. Like he knew in high school going out that he actually wanted to direct.
So were you directing in college?
Yeah, I directed 5 or 6 plays in college and just kind of fell in love with the art form.
Where did you go to college?
I went to University of Vermont.
University of Vermont.
Pete.
Yes, and I was in one of those productions. The debut of the UVM production of West Side Story, and I played Officer Shrink, the only non-singing role. I don't know why I was.
He's got a horrible singing voice.
So it's something that we see over and over, that successful writing partners in features and television frequently end up meeting in college, in film school. So it's not too early. So how did you guys make that transition? You graduate from University of Vermont. What was the transition from college to getting your first job in the industry? Not necessarily a screenwriting job, but what was that journey like for you?
You could start.
Well, it's interesting because I came out here to Chicago in 1989 when I was in a Second City troupe with a young man named Chris Parrish. That's how we actually met. And we were writing sketches, and at the time I wanted to be an actor, but you remember we were writing these sketches and they were doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And then that led to me writing a feature film that got optioned in LA, and that literally took me to LA, and nothing happened with that script, and then I had 15 jobs, waiting tables and teaching ESL, and
Now, did that project, the first one that got optioned, did that get you your first representation?
Yes.
Who was your first
God.
rep? Putting you on the spot.
I honestly don't remember.
Is it Burlstein Gray?
No, they didn't rep me. They said they'd rep me if it got made. That was the first. That was the first bad sign. That was the first sign that it was going to go bad. I honestly do not remember. I know I should. I think Brad Glenn, but I don't know. I don't know. And they wouldn't know, believe me, if I said it. If it was.
So, Josh, what was your experience?
But I just want to, because he won't say it himself, but when he was living out here in Chicago, tell him who the crew you were running with.
Oh, okay. Well, the guys who did, some of you guys may know a movie called Swingers. It might even be before your time, I don't even know, but I lived with Ron Livingston and Jon Favreau, and we all went to LA together, and Vince and all those guys.
Oh, you lived with John?
I didn't live with John. No, sorry. But we were friends in Chicago.
Oh, you guys were hanging out
together. He lived with Ron,
yeah,
but it was like Favreau and Vince Vaughn, like all those dudes. So when he moved out to LA, he had these connections. So one of the first scripts that someone fell in love with was Vince falling in love with one of his specs, and Vince optioned one of his.
Yeah, Vince optioned one of my scripts right after Swingers, and then he got Jurassic Park, and he still has not called me back. I don't know what happened, but yeah.
Oh yeah. So and for me, I when I left University of Vermont, I came out to LA, and then when I came to LA, I did what a lot of you guys are going to do if and when you wind up there, which is you start off at the bottom. I was a PA. I worked on a couple of different TV shows as I did people's laundry. I washed people's cars. I picked up their food. And I was a horrible PA. Absolutely, like I would
So was
lose.
I.
Oh my God! It's the most high stress job in the world. Like I would lose the showrunner's credit card, and then call up to cancel it, and then cancel the wrong credit card. So then all of his credit cards, he's got no credit cards left. It was.
You know what it is? You know what it is? I have to say something about this. It's a little bit like, you know, when the wife asks the husband to wash the laundry and he puts the red sock in and everything comes out red, and they say subconsciously that was an intentional thing to never have to do the laundry. I think being seriously, you know what happens to good PAs who want to be writers? They become producers because they won't ever, you'll just be stuck in that, once you're on that treadmill, you'll just keep going towards production.
Yeah.
But if you suck at PA, it's your way of self-sabotaging yourself, so you have to now go write.
Now you got to make a living writing.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that almost every job I've had in the industry in the last 15, 20 years you can almost tie it directly to a job that I had washing people's cars. So the first TV show I worked on was a TV show called Parker Lewis Can't Lose, where I was a PA. The showrunner of that was a guy named Clyde Phillips, who went on to showrun Dexter. He's doing Nurse Jackie, and some of the writers on that show were the reason that I got my first job because I went to film school after I was doing all the PA work at USC. But my first job for writing for television was on a TV show called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids that was showrun by somebody that was working on one of the shows that I was washing his car.
Yeah.
And then he remembered me and said, hey, that guy was okay. I could sit in a room with him.
It's
and
kind of
that's
a
how I
vetting
got
process,
the job.
isn't it?
100%.
There's 100 ways to get there, too, because Josh, whenever I tell anybody that I work with Josh and they know him, they always say, oh, he's the nicest guy in the world. And that is, I just want to say,
he is
very true about Josh. And Josh, whenever we have meetings to this day, he always afterwards writes notes about the person, something he remembers. And every time we have a meeting, I'm like, oh, we're meeting with so-and-so. Josh is like, yeah, I know, we met him 2 years ago. You don't remember. Like, you know, I'm the opposite. I ride his coattails of kindness, basically.
That's actually a really important thing, a habit to get into, and I do it on my Apple Calendar, my contact list, where after the meeting, as soon as I leave, I write down, likes the Red Sox, talked about their kid Jane and how she loves ballet. Like, I'll write down everything in the meeting so that the next time we wind up running into them, I remember who they are.
And because I know he's doing that.
He does shit. Absolute shit.
So let's talk about you guys transitioning into writing together for the first time. What was the first project, and what happened?
Was it Phantom Investigators, or did we write that movie that didn't sell? I don't remember.
I don't remember. I honestly don't
time
remember. I mean, we've been writing together for such a long time. There were a few that happened kind of simultaneously.
We wrote it. We have 70 pages of a great script somewhere that never finished. And then, but the first thing we ever got paid for was Phantom Investigators, a very short-lived animated show at Nickelodeon, which we've done a lot of work at Nickelodeon, but that was our first job. And I'll never forget, we got paid $6,000, and I was like, where am I going to spend all this money? There's not enough things in this world that I can buy for this kind of money.
There's not enough gum.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we wrote Phantom Investigators together, and then
there was another show we did for them. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
And then, our biggest thing though was we sold a pilot to CW. That was where I got my WGA card, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's kind of a funny story, just in that we'd been writing. You know, we'd like to think we'd been writing all these great things that hadn't sold, and then a friend of mine, an actress named Lauren Graham, some of you may know her. She was on a show called The Gilmore Girls, and she had her own production deal, and we were the first. Production deal means that she's going to develop stuff on the lot for CW. Or was it CW at the time? Yeah. So we go in, and we're the first.
It was WB at the time. CW hadn't agreed.
So we go in. She didn't know anything. She knew I was a writer. So we go in, and we pitch this thing, and this is a phrase you'll hear, we sold it in the room.
Yeah.
And really, all that happened was they wanted to have a good relationship with Lauren. They just, that's how I ultimately got my break, was by knowing somebody who was in a very good situation. And that's how it's going to happen for a lot of you guys. I don't know about you, but connections meant so much more than the actual quality of what we were writing, because what we were writing was not reinventing anything.
And that's something that we've talked about in class here at DePaul, that, obviously when you're trying to break into the business as a screenwriter, it's naturally a very competitive environment. But what is stressed is that when you're there to support your friends, who are also other, aspiring writers and directors, that what you do is you kind of broaden the net a little bit more. So, a struggling actor or actress who ends up getting a deal, and so her opportunities become yours in some ways, and yours become theirs, and it's sort of a strength in numbers way to approach LA.
Great point. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. And it's one of those things where I'm always feeling like when one of my friends succeeds and sells something, I'm the biggest cheerleader in the world for that person. I know some, especially writers,
unless they're dicks.
No, but especially writers, sometimes they get into this mentality where they're like, oh, that guy, am I allowed to? Yeah.
PG-13 would be a good.
That guy.
Ship has sailed.
I'm a better writer than them, and I feel like that is.
It doesn't do you any good.
It doesn't do you any
It's
good.
a good way to waste time. Actually.
Yeah. Because those are the people that you're going to team up with later. And, a lot of the people that I went to film school with are now the showrunners and the big development people. And every once in a while you walk in a room, you're like, oh, hey, I did a student film with you.
Right.
It's great way of building connections and relationships.
Here's a great note, I think, that I wish I'd known when I was younger. When you go and see a friend or anybody in any production, and it's the worst thing you've ever seen, your job is to sit there and try and find one original, really nice thing to say about what you just saw. Never say this. This is just my opinion, so you don't have. But I don't think it does any good to tell somebody all the reasons their show is terrible. Or, just try and find something positive. Because even if you think you're helping, you're not, and they're not going to want to hire you.
But it's the same. The same thing goes when you're being interviewed on a television pilot or an existing series that you might not really think is very good or very funny, but if you can find sincerely, and that's stressing the sincere part. Like if you can sincerely find that one joke in that pilot that you thought, well, that didn't suck entirely, or that
and that's
scene
what you
was,
should tell them. That one joke didn't suck entirely.
But sometimes when you go in and are interviewed and you sincerely say, hey, I really liked that moment of your pilot, that you'd be shocked by how many times those people are like, that's our favorite moment in the script. That's the only one that survived the notes from the executives and everything.
100%.
So let's talk about working as writing partners. What are the strengths and weaknesses? What do you feel your strengths are? Josh, what do you feel yours are? How do you guys balance each other?
I think we should say each other's strengths so we can
There
be
you
a
go.
little more modest about it. Josh he cleans really well. He dresses well for the meeting. No, Josh is.
Pete's got a really hot wife.
Josh is really good. Always been really good at seeing the big picture. He knows what's going to sell and what doesn't, and he knows what big set pieces are. He's really got his finger on the pulse of Hollywood in a way I am terrible at. If I can just tell one story that I think might illustrate that and is kind of interesting is, we started off as comedy writers, and in about 2003 or 4. I think it was Dawn of the Dead and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they did remakes of those, and they killed it at the box office. And Josh came to me and said, dude, put down what we're doing. They're going to remake all these horror movies. We need to find out who's got the rights to them and write them. I'm like, okay, that's a great idea. Do I need to actually start watching horror movies in order to do this? And he's like, I really...
He'd never seen a horror movie
Josh is a big
beforehand.
horror fan. And that was, it's just so funny, the path that gets you there, because until that time, I was 34 or 5. I'd never had any movies made. We wrote 2 of them, Sorority Row and Piranha 3D. We found out who had the rights to them, and we wrote them, and they got made. And that's what he's good at. That was such a great idea. I owe you quite a bit for that. But he's always good at seeing the big picture of what's going to sell and what's going to work. Do you need more time to think about something nice to say?
No. I think as far as, look, the great thing about finding a partner, and I think that's a huge decision that you make, is who you're going to be writing with. Pete's my best friend, so it's really, really, really nice to be able to.
That's my talent.
No. I'm gonna.
That's my talent.
Relax. But so that's one really nice thing is when you go to work and you're with somebody that you just truly love. What Pete brings more than anything in our relationship is he's a rhinoceros with writing. Like he puts his head down and he will pout. Like I'll be lost. I'll be completely lost. Have no idea where to start, how to begin. And he puts his head down and he can power through. I've gone to him and said, "Oh, I got nothing today. Sorry, dude."
I want to record this.
And then that night I'll get home and he's worked for 8 hours and I'll have 15 pages that he sent me and I'm like, I don't know how you did it. So that's a really nice skill set to be able to have, and it being great stuff.
And he'll go
too.
in and put in a great set piece. I mean, seriously, like what he'll put in is this little set piece that's going to sell the movie. You know, my 15 pages are nice, but what he puts in is going to sell the movie. Anyway.
So, you know, a lot of times people underestimate the importance of pitching in the whole process. That, you know, you can work like a slave on your pages and, you know, hole up in your room and write a spec or what have you. But pitching seems to be such a significant part of landing a gig. What are some of the do's and don'ts of pitching?
Yeah, you know, and I feel like you could extend the idea of pitching beyond pitching one particular idea because you're constantly pitching yourself as the writer. I mean, like, for me, one of the most important lessons that I've learned over the course of my time in Hollywood is that when they're hiring you, they're not just hiring you and your ability to write. You can't just be a good writer.
Now, are you talking about selling yourself as writing on a staff where they're not going to be insane being in a room for you for 16 hours?
But not only that, but also writing on a movie. Because when an executive hires you to, whether it's rewriting a movie or taking over a film or starting from scratch, when you're sitting in the room with them, talking to them for the first time, what they're going through is this guy talented, and you're not going to be in the room unless they feel like you've got something. But what they're really doing is, can I hang out with this person for the next 2 years? Because that's how long it takes a movie to get made.
That's just as important in the feature world?
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
And I feel like I think one of the things that we have been relatively successful with is, you know, we're normal people. We're not crazy. You know, we're not caustic. We get along with people. We try to give.
Yeah, we also try to come across as that we will run through walls for the project, which we will do. But you never want to make it sound like, there's nothing else to write, and you called me in, so here I am.
Like, we're working on a project right now, which we can't talk about specifically.
That sounds so assholey. But, why even bring it up? But go ahead.
But like, the Guild has this thing where they're like, you know, you're only allowed to. You can't turn anything in, and you can't, you know, there's a time frame as to. But our attitude is we want to deliver the best project possible. So at least now we're going to work every day and saying, here's more ideas. Here's more ideas. That doesn't work. Here's some other
We've
stuff.
long
Are you pitching alternative ideas to things that they haven't complained about?
No, it's a building process. So you pitch out your ideas and they say, we like that one bit in the end of Act 1. So then you take away everything except for that one bit at the end of Act 1 and start building off of that. And you just keep moving forward.
Yeah, just in case we don't get to this, just to say it is, the thing that will separate you from being an amateur and a professional writer is just learn to let go. Because there's never, this guy Craig Mazin, who has his own show, said something funny. He said he always likes to go and see his movies for the original movies he wrote to see if one line of dialogue remained. I mean, just you got to be prepared to rewrite and don't try to understand it and don't fall in love too hard. Be able to kill your babies, as they say, because they're going to get killed. So just
everything gets killed.
Don't take it personally. It's not personal.
Well, let's talk about writing for comedy and writing for horror. And you know, they on the surface they seem to be two completely different opposite ends of the spectrum, but they both share some commonalities in terms of how the process is approached in writing. What are, you know, some of the obligatory things that you must have in either type of a script?
Kills.
Kills.
Kills for horror. I mean, that's what we're always talking about. What's the kill? And being able to come up with a great kill can sell a movie.
If you have 7 kills in no movie, you might be able to sell that. I mean, that's how important kills are.
Yeah. Which is which is what I love about horror movies. I mean, like I am so passionate about horror, and it's purely, for me though, our horror movies are, I like to think of them as more roller coasters than, vomit bags. There's a version where it's all blood and guts and all that kind of stuff, and certainly if you watch Piranha, there's some pretty disgusting stuff. But for me, what I love about those kinds of movies are when you can laugh at the same time.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about Piranha. How do you balance that? It seems to be such sort of an interesting tightrope of balancing, transitioning between horrific moments and and busting a gut and laughing out loud. How do you pull that off?
Some people would say not very well. One of the things, for us, Josh and I are big fans of horror movies from the 70s. And if you look at all those movies, it is a sort of a fun, some scares.
What are some of your favorites?
Oh, all of them. I mean, Friday the 13th,
Well, I was telling Chris the
Halloween, all that. Yeah.
That like when I grew up, most of the kids
Nightmare
my
on Elm
age
Street.
had like the poster of Star Wars on their wall, and I had Michael Myers above my bed. Like I became obsessed with that film.
But if you look at Nightmare on Elm Street and all those movies, there's a lot of humor in all of those. And then we sort of got away from that and more into the trench coaty kind of Saw movies. And I remember when I saw the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, there was nothing funny in the whole movie. Like there wasn't one joke, and it almost didn't feel real. Like that's not real life. There's no life that I know of where there's never a joke ever told. So we look at the horror as being sort of more fun, in addition to in between the kills. But that's not really the direction that things are heading. To be totally honest, I think.
Well, I think there's a lot more. Well, I think horror movies right now, the movies that are making a lot of money are the ones that are a little more paranormally a vibe to them. They're a little more spiritual. They're a little more less. I think 8 to 10 years ago it was all blood and guts. It was the Saw and Hostel, and then but the last few years it's kind of transitioned into more of the spooky person in the background kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, let me ask you this then. Do you believe to scare today's audiences that there has to be that viscera, it's got to be blood and guts, or is it still possible to scare an audience from what they can't see?
I think it's all in your imagination. For me, once you put the blood and guts, yes, there's the cringe factor, but it's not scary. It's revolting. You know what I mean? So for me, it's all, if you can try to create that feeling of tension between what you're seeing and what the audience is expecting to
What's
see.
That
I
great
think
kill we were talking about? Was it in Scream where he crawls over the body? The cop, he's unconscious.
Oh, it's the Kevin Williamson thing. Yeah, Kevin Williamson. He wrote the I Know What You Did Last Summer films, and I don't know if you've ever read the original I Know What You Did Last Summer script, but there's a great kill in the movie, in the script, that didn't get shot because they didn't have enough money or whatever, and then he just lifted that kill and put it in one of the Scream movies. It was the one with the cop car where she's in the back of the cop car and they crash, and then she has to.
The killer's unconscious in the front.
The masked guy is, and she has to crawl out through the thing and over his body in order to escape. That exact scene is lifted directly out of I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Like that's a very. I think that's a great. Very scary. Without blood and guts. Yeah.
But for us, I mean, the kills are like we were joking that whenever we're on vacation anywhere,
and we're not getting along. We talk about all the ways we would like to kill each other. And Josh had a great when we were on a cruise with our families, because our families are close, and he said, you know what I would do? I would wait for you to go down that closed water slide, and I would take a sword, and I would stick it down the middle, so that you would get cut in half when you go through. So and then I'll be like, you know what I would do? I would tie you to the anchor. And when it went down through that thing, you would get crunched into a million bits. So we always talk about the ways we'd kill each other. It's the key to a healthy marriage.
Okay. So let's talk villains then.
Yeah.
what do you feel really makes for a strong antagonist or villain, monster, what have you? And what are some of the stakes where writers make that it just doesn't quite pull it off?
Well, the writers on Sorority Row did not pull it off, in my estimation.
Yeah, well, I feel like I love Sorority Row. I really do, and I'm a big hero for the tone, and I really loved it. I don't know if we didn't do our job completely for
I thought
the villain.
Why do you feel that way?
I feel like there are some kill scenes in there that I'm really, really proud of.
Yeah.
The bottle scene,
Nobody asked you what you're proud of. I'm just saying, nobody asked that question.
But I think one of the problems. Well, the interesting thing about horror movies, also, as you guys know, is that the villain, in a lot of ways, is the poster guy. Like most movies, it's not the antagonist that's on the poster.
Right.
On the horror movies, it's Leatherface, or it's Pinhead, or it's Michael Myers, or it's Jason. Like that's the poster.
Mike Myers is to answer your question, I think that's a good way to talk about it. You know, for those of you who are fans of that series, in the third one, I think they thought Mike Myers isn't in it. They just decided Halloween is Halloween. We don't need Mike Myers. Just sort of like, probably at the same time that Rocky decided we're not doing Apollo Creed again, like we don't need him. So they made this movie, and it didn't do very well. So
Season of the Witch.
So they bring Mike Myers, Season of the Witch, which is not a terrible movie, but they need Mike Myers. So then they decided they got to bring Mike Myers back. And then as Mike Myers progresses, when you get into the Rob Zombie movies, the thing that didn't work, the thing that was tough is Mike Myers is the boogeyman. They say it in the first movie. He's a guy that just plods along killing with a knife.
Well, they call him that. They actually say
they call him the boogeyman.
Yeah.
The minute you start trying to figure out who he was and why he was, there's something lost there. You know, like part of the mystery of him is he's going to kill you. That's the only relationship you're ever going to have with Mike Myers, is he's going to be coming after you with a knife. It's a great villain. You know, it's just and the more you try to define him, the less mystery you have. You know.
I would disagree with that.
Well, you're an idiot.
No. I would disagree with that from a standpoint
I'm wearing a coat.
You are wearing a coat. I'm wearing a T-shirt. Because you look at something like the Saw movies, and those movies, I think, succeed on a lot of levels, and the entire series is about learning who Jigsaw is. So I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I also feel like, yeah.
No, but in that movie, I'm saying there's a lot of different ways to create a villain, and I think what doesn't work is, which is kind of what we did, is when you kind of try and paste one on at the end. It's got to when you find out who the villain is, this is how I would say, there has to be that aha moment, and if there's no aha moment, you've not succeeded.
The aha moment of the killer really was this, or the motivation really was this.
Well, yeah, I think it could be either. It depends on what kind of horror movie it is. If it's a who's doing all this killing, when we find out who the killer is, we have to go, oh my God, how did I not see that was the killer?
Well,
or of course that was the killer, or that was a good reason it was the killer. But if it's the brooding one, that's a different kind of horror.
It could have been. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Chris.
well, the thing is, I think you guys are both right because of you look
Who's
at
more
Jaws. Right? Well,
who's better looking?
You're both better looking. No, but you look at Jaws, or you look at Piranha, or Mike Myers in this case. That you've got this immovable evil force that is just going to destroy and kill, and then you look at Jaws: The Revenge, where they're like, let's give the shark a motivation,
right?
And have him just kill the Brody family, and everyone's like, "Wow, that was just a really interesting turd." And then, but then you look at like Hannibal Lecter or other characters that have these really intriguing backstories and motivations, or Norman Bates, these classic villains. One of the things that we talk about at DePaul is that. And it's not just for the horror franchise, but when you have a villain or an antagonist, when you're creating one, it's good to keep in mind that you're writing that in their mind, they're the hero of their story. That they're right and everybody else is wrong. Even if that means I'm going to kill billions.
Wow.
I'm right and everyone else is wrong.
I've learned a little something here today. That's good. No, really.
But that doesn't apply to the shark.
I never thought of that.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. That's a great way of looking at things.
Did you write that down?
I did not. Can someone take a note for me?
So let's jump over to writing for franchises.
Yes.
what are the pros and cons of writing specs to being someone who's writing on assignment?
Well, the benefits are you're getting paid. That would be one benefit for writing on assignment. I think when one of the hardest things of writing, one of the things that I do when we write is whenever we get an assignment or we're going in for a job. This is a big thing that I always tell. I teach every now and then too, and I always say this is become your own expert on whatever that is that you're going to see. If you're going in for an animated movie, see every animated movie from the last 10 years. If you're going in for a horror movie, go see every movie you can when it comes to a horror movie, because you want to be in a position where when you're talking to the person about the franchise and they give you some bad idea, you want to cite an example like, oh, that's a little bit like Josh has done this. Oh, that's good. No, it didn't work in Leprechaun 4, so I'm a little worried. And then you've got him. I mean, then you've checkmated him. So the better prepared you are when you work, because if they give you a note and you kind of got to do what they say, So unless you can give them a really compelling, not personal attack reason as to not to do it, you're going to get stuck doing it. So you need to know more about the franchise than they do, which is really easy to do because they don't know anything except that they have some idea for a scene that they'd like to see in the movie. So you gotta. The best thing you can do. This is a great thing for anybody who wants to be a director too, and when working with an actor, is you got to make them feel like they came up with your idea. That if you can do that, you've really won. So that's the way I always try to make it.
Is that a collaborative thing that happens in the room where they might suggest something and then you guys would say, oh yeah, and that would work because we can have this happen?
You know what we sometimes do? We actually pitch something and we leave a huge obvious hole. Right? Remember we did this when we pitched on Saw. We leave this huge obvious hole in the middle of it. And then they'll say, and what if that guy got, and we're like, that's a great idea. And then we come right in with everything that we had to back that up. And the person feels like, I inspired genius because look at all that stuff they came up with. That's one way to do it.
Yeah. Going back also, just to go back a second, because we didn't really go into pitching in detail, but that's one of the things that we wind up doing a lot, where our pitches, there's a zillion different ways to pitch. So sometimes we go into a room and we just talk like we're brainstorming with the executive and coming up with ideas. A lot of times that'll happen on the first meeting. But sometimes what we do is we go through and we actually write out the pitch line by line, every single thing, and we memorize it and practice it.
Trade back and forth
50 times.
We write in little things like, like we'll write, like at one point in the meeting I might go, are you going to do my whole part or you want me to do it? And we plan that. Like we'll have these sort of planned things to make it look like we get along and we're
in our script. Sometimes it'll say in the script itself say, oh, and what was that, Pete? And it's the transition for him to start talking. And one of the other big things that we do that I think is kind of a good way to approach it when you guys go in is sort of what he was saying about leaving the blank ideas, but also coming up with some great ideas that you think are amazing that you don't mention, so that on the post meeting when they say, and that you start brainstorming, you're able to come up with that thing off the top that looks like it's off the top of your head.
And it feels collaborative, too.
Yeah.
There's a great note, by the way, that I love. I think it's from a great book called Hello, He Lied. And in it, I forget the writer says, there is no such thing as a general meeting. That's a really, really good point. In other words, if you have a general meeting to meet somebody and you just decide you're just going to go in there because it's a general meeting, no. Your job is to find out everything that person has ever made. Go see them, go be ready, and just be ready, and then think of something that might relate to them. Make it feel like a general meeting, but try and drive the meeting with your own ideas. There's no such thing as a general meeting.
And there's really no excuse now not to do that with like IMDb
it's so
Pro
easy.
and everything. You could easily
one funny story about my life. I wrote with.
This better be funny. I mean, you just said it's going to be funny. Go ahead.
I wrote for a little while before I was writing with Pete. I wrote with this woman named Monica Johnson, who was seriously one of the most amazing screenwriters.
She wrote with Albert Brooks for years and years, and she wrote, Lost in America. She's a great writer.
Lost in America, Modern Family. I mean, these incredible films. And she was going through a breakup with Albert at the time, Albert Brooks. And we walked into a meeting.
Just wait, one side note about her.
Yeah.
Married 9 times, and every time they worked together, she never got out of bed. He'd have to go to her house, and she'd sit in bed while they wrote. But go ahead.
Yeah, she was absolutely crazy, but in a great way. Yeah. I loved her so much. She's passed away a few years ago, but I learned so much by working with her. But we went into a meeting once, having not really done any research on who the person was, and we're sitting there, and they're like, "What kind of stuff do you want to write?" And Monica says, "Yeah, we really want to do a romantic comedy, but we don't want to do like one of these mushy ones like." And I don't remember what. I wish I could remember what the movie was, but it was like Runaway Bride, and directly on the wall behind her, gigantic poster of Runaway Bride. So.
Did you get the
do
job?
your research. It was like, yeah.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
So when you guys are brought in to pitch a take on an existing franchise, a prequel, a sequel, a remake, how do you incorporate or stay true to the essence of what they love about it? And how do you bring about your own style and voice? How do you fuse the two?
Josh
of those?
is great at this.
My feeling when you're doing a remake or especially a remake, because both of our films, both Sorority Row and Piranha, the produced movies that horror movies we've made, are both remakes of obviously Piranha and a movie called House of Sorority Row. And our feeling is, look, if you love a movie, then what's the point of I loved Piranha. I absolutely loved the original Piranha. I thought it was really fun. There's no point in just making I don't quite understand the psycho shot-for-shot remake they did, because it exists. You can go rent it. Our feeling is you want to find what is exciting to you about that. And when we started thinking about Piranha,
what are the essentials? Blood everywhere. I mean, blood. Yeah, for Piranha, blood everywhere. Is an essential.
Right.
Death on water. I mean, those are the things you got to hit. By the way, just in case you're wondering, Piranha still holds the record for most gallons of fake blood ever used in a motion picture. Hold your applause.
How many? How many gallons?
Was it 8,000?
Oh God, I don't know.
8,000 gallons.
Because they kept pouring it in the water.
Yeah.
Wow.
But there was a lot of okay, if we're going to do Piranha, what's the way in? What's the way in that's going to be fun for us? And when we realized we were excited about writing is when we came up with the idea of Lake Havasu. So spring break in the water. That's where you're like, oh, okay, I want to write that. I want to write that film.
Did they give you certain parameters of what they wanted when you guys went in with Piranha?
No. And that was an interesting, and it might be, we wanted to write a horror. We wrote Piranha before we wrote Sorority Row. And we knew we wanted to do it, and I found a producer who had the rights to Piranha. At the time, we had not written any horror, so he's not just going to give us his franchise. So we went to him and said, listen, hold off, don't do anything, just give us a few months. Just give us a couple of months with it. And we went off and we wrote, and we pitched him the idea, and then we went off and we wrote a script that was called Killer Fish. That was our property, and if he didn't like it, we could go off and...
Interesting side note, the reason for that is we can't write a script for him unless he pays us, because we're WGA. So this is stop the camera. This is sort of a sidestepping move where we decided to write an original script and give it to him.
And we own the script. It was completely
was
ours.
But guys, doesn't that go on all the time? I mean, there were so many stories about 12 Years a Slave, where he did so many drafts on that. And it created, I don't know if you guys watched him getting the award between the animosity between the director and the screenwriter
really
during
awkward.
the Oscars.
Yeah. But it was one of those things where, and then we gave him the script, and luckily they liked it a lot, and they purchased our spec, at that time. But that was a way of getting a property made. And there are a zillion of them like that. Like Sorority Row, nobody really was following House on Sorority Row at the time.
Yeah, but it was a good enough title.
Yeah.
And just so you know, when you guys write, for all the movies we've written, or the 2 movies that we made, we got passed on by every other studio except the one that made it. So just know that's one of the big things I always want to say to writers is, it only takes one person to make your movie. So there's going to be so many rejections, and I can tell you, literally I could sit here and tell you 10 stories of people putting scripts in drawers, including, Vin Diesel, his first thing, some of you may know this, he wrote a short called Multifacial about him and auditioning for all the different ethnicities in New York City, because everything he went in was Jewish, black, whatever. And he did it, and I think the story is he stuck it in a drawer. His dad took it out. He made that movie, submitted it to the Colorado Short Film Festival. it got in, and he was cast directly into Saving Private Ryan from that. So there's a lot. There's a ton of those stories. So don't let anybody telling you your movie sucks or your screenplay sucks stop you from getting it to everybody you can. That's a tangent, but anyway.
Well, we're going to take some questions in just a minute, but there's just one last thing I want to ask about is that, one of the things that really amazes me about Peter and Josh is their versatility as writers. You're looking at two guys who are responsible for rebooting both Piranha and Sorority Row, as also being who are also the creators of the animated, wrote the pilot for the animated Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Not the creators, but we did write the pilot.
Okay.
Yeah.
They wrote the pilot for Avatar: The Last Airbender, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the animated series.
That's right.
As well as Good Luck Chuck with Dane Cook.
Thank you.
Laugh it up. The residuals that come in on that for him are just insane. Yeah.
Well, Versatility.
I believe you forgot Date My Mom in Next.
Oh, I'm sorry. Date My Mom in Next. Yes.
You're welcome,
But-
America.
Okay. Versatility.
Who wants to be a Playboy
Versatility.
centerfold?
Who wants to be a Playboy centerfold, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah.
Is that what you feel is the key to your longevity in, as screenwriters? Is it versatility or is it something else?
It's an interesting question. Somebody once said to me, and this meant, I don't know if if you're a good guy and you stick around long enough, it'll start to happen for you. And I actually think, I'm not saying we're good enough guys, but I'm saying all of those things, most of those things you say are jobs that I was thrilled to get at the time that they came. They were all one step after another. And yes, I think when you say versatility, if you are a likable guy, people will want to work with you.
Or girl.
Or girl, sorry, yeah. And which isn't to say that I'm, there are so many the absence of, don't be unlikable. There's a lot of things that people will call you in on that I don't know much about, but people say, you're funny or whatever, would you come in and do this? And that's how you end up going there. I mean, these days we mostly do screenplays because that's where the horses are running. But if next year we sold a TV script, we'd be running completely in that direction,
No, but I think one good lesson is that exactly what you're saying, versatility. It's always about sidestepping and figuring out where you can plug yourself into. So I'm hesitant, although I heard on the Script Notes is a great podcast. I'm sure most of you guys listen to it.
You should be if you're
not.
It's
the Craig Mazin and John
August.
It's a great program. But they were saying on their show about find your niche and nail it home. I disagree with that. My feeling is yes, find your niche and nail it home for that niche, but always be looking, keep your head above the water and keep looking around to see what the next possibility is.
Why pigeonhole yourself?
Yeah. And it certainly makes it easier for the agents to represent you if they can just say, Josh and Pete are horror writers, but we don't only want to do horror. Like we do the kids stuff together. We're working on a comedy spec right now that we're really excited about. So, I mean, it's spread out and
You got to improvise sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
One other thing I also just want to say that's unrelated, but I think is important is, a lot of times when people come to me with work or when come to me or Josh with projects, the one thing I would also just really encourage is the two things you consider when you're creating any project, whether it's TV, whether it's reality TV, whether it's horror, whether it's comedy. The key to this business for me is two words: original and familiar. And by that I mean it has to be familiar enough that everybody relates to it, but original enough to make it stand out. I'll give you an example. A lot of times people will come to us and say, my buddies and I went to Vegas this past weekend. I got the stories are unbelievable. That's extremely familiar. That's a very familiar story. A bunch of guys go to Vegas. But the minute you have them wake up the next day, not know what happened the night before, they've lost a friend, they got to go through their pockets to find out what happened, suddenly you have an original and familiar movie. You want to marry those things together. Somebody once came to me and they wanted to pitch this movie to me, and he said, the title of the movie is Groomzilla. And I said, stop right there. In the title, I understand this whole movie. It's stepping in, the familiar is the zeitgeist of all these bridezillas that are going on, but the original part is it's a magic ring that goes on a finger, and suddenly it's the groom who's going through all of this stuff. And some of you are thinking, well, that doesn't feel terribly original either. But by Hollywood standards, that's an original take added to something familiar. And that, to me, is the key to selling. I don't know how you feel about it. But that's, anyway, that's just want to get that out there.
Okay, so let's take some questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I see hands, but are we going to the mic?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody go to the
So whoever has questions, please go to the mic.
Please report to the microphone.
You know, it's interesting with the Hangover. If you've ever seen Dude, Where's My Car? Essentially the exact same.
It's
movie.
it's funny.
So I guess
funny.
it wasn't original.
And Dude, Where's My Car was Lost Weekend.
Oh,
yeah.
Do we have the first person? Hi.
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 Hi. My name is Marie Uran, and my question is, okay, you'd mentioned before about how when you get to a meeting and they're sussing you out, trying to make sure that you're not crazy. I hear about that a lot, but to give me kind of a baseline, because to what's normal to one person is crazy to another.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples of what would be considered crazy behavior?
Dressing up in a suit and tie for a writers meeting is it's jeans and a t-shirt and this is as fancy as he ever, and I don't think he ever wears a jacket to go to a meeting.
That's just for you guys.
You guys are special.
Yeah.
It's about, and it's also just about, just
If you're
normal.
worried about being crazy going into a meeting, I'm sorry to tell you, you're probably crazy. No, I'm joking.
No.
But the bar is so low in LA.
Yeah, that's true.
You
The
know?
bar
It's
so low.
very, very low.
One thing that's really hard, I'll give you, you know what, here's something that might help, because I'm guilty of it, and some of you may already know this, but sometimes you start talking and you can't stop. That's a bad sign. Oh, here's another one. Try not to lean forward. It seems too eager. I was once told to sit back. Oh, here's one that Josh always reminds me of, and I never do it. These are side notes. Look at everybody in the meeting.
Oh my God. We'll walk into a room and there's 4 people there and he knows who the decision maker is and he just locks eyes on them and just stares at them through the entire pitch. And then that makes me have to spend extra time on the other 3 people and ignore that guy because I'm trying to make up for him just talking to that one person. And the truth is...
Who in the room doesn't think I'm an asshole right now? But the truth of the matter is, especially because what's going to happen is that person who makes the decision is going to go out with his team and say, I thought that was okay. What did you guys think? And the guy you didn't talk to is going to be like, I thought it sucked. So that's a very important thing.
Yeah, but Pete, just devil's advocate real quick. When you're pitching something laying back like this.
No, you don't want to. I mean, I'm not saying pull up a blanket.
Yeah, but I mean, your energy. But it just totally kills the energy of what you're expressing.
I think there's a media. You're right. But you don't want to be like that. You don't want to seem overeager. I've had people tell me that the worst thing that they can smell on a writer when they come in is fear. And they smell it on half. And I'm sure they smelled it on me. So you sort of. I don't think it's a matter of oh man. But I think there's just something that's more like. Speaking as if you believe in what you're talking about.
But you don't want to be like, QVC.
Yeah. Well, one nice thing about being a partnership is that we're able to and we've been doing a little bit today, is rag on each other constantly.
Yeah.
Because every once in a while, I admit in a pitch meeting, I'll go ape shit a little bit and stand up and start acting shit out. And he immediately will make fun of me for doing it. And it's a nice way because it shows my enthusiasm for the project, but also shows that I'm not crazy because he's making fun of me. So it's a nice way of kind of balancing things out.
Yeah.
Did you have a follow-up question or?
I did. I can't remember it. I'll get back to you guys later.
Awesome.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Rob Melnick. I can prove to you that I saw Piranha 3.
Okay.
Other than the buckets of blood, there was one scene that I really took away from that movie.
Yep.
And I bet you know what I'm about to say.
I have a pretty good idea.
I have never seen a film that has a floating, dismembered penis underwater in 3D. Now, that was the first. I'm just wondering who came up with that.
That one was actually not us. So what happens is there's a lot. What happens is when a director comes in, he winds up.
Part of it was us. We had the severed penis.
Did we have the severed penis?
No. What Alex Ajay, the best part of that scene, which I love, which we didn't do, is is for those of you
did
who
have
don't,
a separate
for those of you who
penis.
don't remember, the reason it works so well is the piranha eats the penis. Here we go. I'm going to break it down for you. swims out of screen. And while everybody's like, oh my God, the fish swims back on screen, and he literally is looking at the screen saying, you like that? You like that? And then he goes, bleh, and he spits the penis out. That was really the piece
And
de
didn't another
resistance.
fish come in and grab it after?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But what I love to say that my dad is a gastroenterologist, and he actually created a cure for a Mediterranean fever disease. And I say to him, Dad, everybody's got their reason to be in this world, and yours is to save lives, and mine is to show Jerry O'Connell's penis getting bigger. Everybody has something to give the world.
Yeah.
Well, it was unforgettably disgusting.
You're
I'll say
welcome.
that.
You're welcome.
Enjoy, sir.
Hi.
Hey, what's up, man?
So you guys provided additional writing for the first 2 episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Was it a decision for both of you to not join in for the rest of the series, or why were you guys not writers?
Here
for,
comes legal implications.
Or is that not okay to ask?
Well, yeah.
All right.
Well, no. I'll tell you the honest thing that happened.
We're being recorded.
Yeah.
Well, this will be on YouTube.
Yeah,
eventually.
great. So, love that show. Absolutely love it. We were brought in. The 2 creators of the show had an outline of what they wanted to do with the show. They weren't totally comfortable for writing the screenplay.
At that point, they were still bogged down with a lot of details of what they wanted to get.
So they hired us to come in and write. We wrote the first 2 episodes. We wrote the pilot and the second one. And then, because the WGA doesn't protect writers in the animation field, I don't know exactly how it went. By that time, we had already stepped away and were on doing something else.
I can say we were not happy that it said additional writing. That seemed a little...
Because we were the ones who wrote Fade In and Fade Out.
Yeah,
I mean, we
right.
wrote the first 2 episodes, and those writers came in and granted, they had a very, very, very complete outline that detailed characters and all that kind of stuff. But had it been done through the WGA in a different way, we probably would have gotten at least Coast screenplay or
had we gone and
teleplay.
worked on that show, it would have been difficult because
They
it would not have been a good.
They
fit.
had the 2 writers that came up, or the 2 creators that came up with that were amazing, and they had very, very detailed outlines of everything, and
We
it
were
was their
blown away,
show.
yeah,
It was their show.
And so if we had been right, yeah. So
Yeah,
But
it was
with
a little
most
difficult.
animation, you really don't see much in terms of residuals or
No,
anything.
no,
Nothing. There is none.
There's no animation. It's like the
residuals.
Wild West
Yeah.
for the the production companies. It's one of the big contentious things with feature animation as well. Is the companies make all the money and the writers and
the writers
creators
of
make very little.
SpongeBob get no points or pieces of any Happy Meals or health insurance. Actually,
Yeah, it's
I think we have time for one more question. Is there one more? Nope. Okay.
awesome.
All right.
there's no more time.
Well, please give thank you to Peter and Josh.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.